So let's move on to the next topic of discussion, which is study design. So in study design, there are two main types of studies. The first one is called primary research and the second is called secondary research. We'll be talking of primary research, wherein we deal with actual people, actual populations. Secondary research is meta-analysis, systematic reviews, wherein the source of information is previous studies. So in primary research, these are the kinds of studies that you will see. There is descriptive studies, there's analytical studies, and there's experimental interventions. Now, descriptive and analytical come under a heading called observational. I'm going to tell you why. Okay. So this is the tree that you've got to kind of remember. The two main branches are experimental and observational. As the name suggests, observe में हम सिर्फ observe करते हैं. We do not manipulate or intervene in any of the variables or any of the outcomes. In experimental, we do. And so naturally, we now know that experimental may what would be included? RCTs, controlled trials or uncontrolled trials, okay? And even community-based intervention. So these are experimental-based branches. Under observational, we've got two branches more. One is descriptive, which just describes with numbers, say study characteristics, what is the mean, median, mode, average number, surveys, questionnaires, all of that. And there's analytical, which seeks to have some explanation. It looks for a cause or association. All right. It seeks to explain. This just describes, this explains, and this manipulates the variables. So under descriptive, we have, descriptive cross-sectional surveys. We have case studies. We have case reports and case series. Under analytical, we have ecological studies. Some people would perhaps not put it here, but I've chosen to do that. We have cross-sectional studies again, which when these cross-sectional studies are repeated more than once, we have cohort studies and we have case control studies. And we are going to describe each of them in turn. So let's go on to the descriptive studies, which only describe. And they can be cross-sectional in nature, which means at a single point in time on one population, you get to know the characteristics of the population. You do a survey, you do a questionnaire at one point in time. That is a descriptive study. Now, the same cross-sectional study can be done more than once, in which multiple cross-sectional study ho jayega. At a certain point in time, you do a cross-sectional study. Later on, you again repeat the study, in which case it would probably go in the domain of analytical, because we are looking possibly at associations, causations, all of it. So, cross-sectional में भी दो भाग हो सकते हैं. Ideally, when we talk of descriptive, we are talking of case reports and case series. Now, there is a hierarchy of evidence, okay? So, there is a hierarchy of evidence, and at the top, it's RCTs, and at the very bottom, it's case series, case reports. And this is something that also, appears in the exam. So, you should know this hierarchy of evidence. It's good to know for the exams, it's good to know as a general principle, but I'll tell you how even case reports and case series can be very, very important with the right question and in the right timing, right? A lot of our understanding in psychiatry and medicine has come about with case series and case reports, but this hierarchy of evidence you should learn. Okay, so below RCTs will be uncontrolled trials and single arm trials, all of that. Example of an observational descriptive study. This is a cross-sectional study which was done in the US during the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, right? And then they were doing the survey, finding that certain groups of people were falling more ill. Then they traced that back to certain bathhouses, and then leading back to that, they discovered the virus, the HIV virus. Very, very important that this was all uncovered by the use of survey methods initially. So this is a cross-sectional, single cross-sectional study which has great implications later on. Case report. An important case report would be Phineas Gage, the man who started neuroscience. Before Phineas Gage and his case came in the picture, the frontal lobes were supposed to be very rudimentary, lobes. They had no part to play in our personality, in cognitions, in illnesses. But after this particular case, wherein he was a railway worker and the rod went up his eye and, jammed down his brain and came out the other side. And so his frontal lobe was completely disrupted, and they saw a marked change in his personality before and after, which, due to which we came to know the importance of this particular part of the brain. So this is how a case report can be very important. Case series are a series of case reports. Again, they are lower down in the evidence-based medicines in that hierarchy. But again, the thalidomide and phocomelia association was first found out by a obstetrician gynecologist who wrote a letter to Lancet pointing out that several of his patients, female patients who were taking thalidomide, also gave birth to children with these anomalies, with these limb anomalies. And so that is how, a great medical kind of uncovering happened because of this case series. Then we go on to analytical studies, which basically observes but also tries to seek relationships. Okay, so here statistics come into play, and very, very important because they'll be asked in the exams as well. So we have three main kinds of studies that I will be describing it here. I've not included multiple cross-sectional studies here purposely because I don't think I can add something extra right now. So we have the case control study, we have the cohort study, and the ecological study. Let's move one by one. So in a case control study, we start off with two groups of people, cases and controlled. This is the definitive group. So if you start up with first identifying a diseased and a non-diseased population, you're talking of a case control study first. And they are matched so that they are not very different from each other. And then retrospectively we go back, right? So in the timeline, we have observed cases and controls here and we have identified them. And then we go backwards in time. We go through their medical records, asking them to recall their own history to past exposure to a possible causal agent, and we find that in X duration of time, it happened maybe X years back, there was some exposure to a chemical. So it is retrospective usually. All right. But as you can see, there could be a bias, there could be recall bias, and this is no way to establish causality because there are 9 criteria by Bradford Hill. This is no way to establish causality, but we could find a possible association through case control studies. And this is a very good example of a case control study wherein in South Carolina, they identified groups of people with pellagra and without pellagra. At that point in time, they did not know that niacin deficiency could cause pellagra. So they looked at the cases, they looked at the controls, and they went back in time and found out that, okay, their diets are different. And so they looked at the changes in their diet, what is different between cases and controls, and found out that it is possible niacin deficiency that led to the manifestation of this disease. How do we represent the data here? You first start off with the case and the control column because that is how we first identify it. All right, and it's a 2 by 2 table that we construct, but actually a 3 by 3 if we also take this, this and this into consideration. So exposure to if it's exposed to that particular agent of interest. So those with the disease, A plus C, those without the disease, B plus D. Are they exposed? A plus B. Are they not exposed? C plus D. So this is how you represent the data. And so what information can we derive from this? One important information is the odds ratio, the relative odds of being exposed if you are a case rather than the control. So this we derive from odds of exposure in a case upon odds of exposure in a control. Simple cross multiplication. All right. Odds ratio is AD which is 130 and 135 in this case, upon BC, which is 115 and 120. This brings us to an odds ratio of 1.27. All right, going on to the cohort study. In a cohort study, we first start with the exposure. We do not know if there are cases as yet. So we start with the exposure and we prospectively follow them up over time till they develop the disease. So the exposure can be anything. It can be a vaccine, a surgical procedure, environmental toxin, it could be anything, and see how members in the each group develop a particular disease, complication or outcome. So a very, very important cohort study in the British Medical Journal. I think we must have heard about Bradford Hill's criteria. So A. Bradford Hill and Richard Doll were the doctors who found a very strong association between lung cancer and smoking. And they found it primarily in a group of doctors. And it was a very good cohort study. I think they followed them up over 20 to 50 years. And that is because these doctors need to keep updating themselves in the registers, right? The GMC and all of it. So we have very good sources of data and keeping tabs on them. So they followed them up and they did find that smoking, especially how much you smoke, has an impact on development of lung cancer. Very, very important kind of study on medical history. And how do we represent data in a cohort study? It's slightly different. We'll start with the definitive group that we identify first. We start with the exposure first, which is the cohort group, and the exposure absent, which is the comparison group. And then we write disease present or disease absent. Please note exposure is in the rows. So E aata hai, this signifies rows. So this would always be in the rows column. So again, A, B, C, D, and we get all the summary statistics. What information can we derive from this data? A, of course, we can get odds risk, but then we also can get other important variables as well and statistics as well. We can get the absolute risk of disease in the exposed, which is A upon A plus B. So in the exposed cohort, how many develop the disease out of the total who were exposed to it? So A upon A plus B. Then we can also get absolute risk in the non-exposed. In the non-exposed group, how many got the disease versus didn't get the disease? So C upon C plus D. When we subtract the absolute risk in the exposed from the absolute risk in the non-exposed, it's called the attributable risk or the absolute risk reduction. It's a very, very important statistic because in RCTs, the same table is used and ARR is used to derive something called NNT. We'll describe this later on. All right. Another important ratio that we can derive, but only from a cohort study, is a risk ratio or relative risk. Is the fraction of the two absolute risks obtained earlier, risk in exposed versus risk in non-exposed. It's the probability of the outcome occurring in the exposed versus the probability in the non-exposed people. So RR is given by these values, A upon A plus B upon C by C plus D. So in attributable risk, we subtract, and in risk ratio, we divide one by the other. That's the only difference. And so the RR can have a range of value, and each of these values means something, as you will see later when interpreting meta-analysis or looking at forest plots. If the RR is equal to 1, the risk is equal. That means there is no association. If the RR is more than 1, that means the probability of the disease is more in the exposed versus the non-exposed. Then the risk is exposed greater than risk in non-exposed. It's a positive association. So possibly causal, not definitively, but possibly causal. If the RR is less than 1, which means the risk in the exposed is less than the risk in the non-exposed of developing the disease, then it's a negative association and possibly the exposure is protective.